I'm the leader of this AI LA community, so thank you all. First off, I just love to thank Huge for letting us use their space and providing beer and pizza. So thank you, Huge. 100% ticket proceeds is benefit LA's Best. LA's Best is an after-school enrichment program that serves 192 elementary schools in the LA Unified District. Helps kids have a safe space in after school to meet new friends and to learn new skills. Doesn't really just not only helps the children, but actually really helps the families, because the families have 2, maybe 3 different jobs and don't have enough time or the bandwidth to actually take their kids, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So all this money, I think we've almost raised over $1,400 tonight, goes straight to those children. So thank you so much. So just to get started, we'll hand it off and everyone will introduce themselves and then we'll start this amazing panel. So, Stephen?
Hey, I'm Stephen Schkolne. I have a background in computer science. On the AI, I've done most of my work around computer vision and things related to augmented reality. I've also done a lot of work related to VR. My PhD thesis actually created the world's first VR painting tool, which today people call Tilt Brush. So I had the fortune to have all the hardware to get a lot of low-hanging fruit when it was there to be grabbed in academia. And today I'm working on other things having to do with 3D design and construction, sort of blending VR and AR and building and things like that. So, cool.
Hi, I'm Mark. I spent 18 years at Pixar making cartoons and left to keep innovating on new stuff and started a company that creates basically a different kind of AI that is a performance engine to make interface a face that you actually talk to. That's it.
Hi, I'm Seth. Thanks for having me. I think I'm the only one up here that's under 6 feet and or not wearing a cool hat. So, thanks for including me. I'm an investor at Greylock Partners based in San Francisco, so I just came in for the weekend. And I spent the last 4 years as a product manager at Facebook on Messenger, so I helped launch the chatbot platform and helped kind of separate Messenger into its own app, and it's kind of part of that journey. So yeah, thank you for having me and look forward to the discussion.
Hi everybody, my name is Ramsay Brown. I'm a creative technologist, a neuroscientist, one of those circus bears from the zoo who escaped and taught himself Node.js, and an Oxford comma enthusiast. I went to USC where I was a great PhD student until I got some VC money to drop out, so I became a great master's student really quick. And I worked on a Google Maps for the brain. So instead of saying how to get between here and Venice, you could say how to get between smell and memory, and it would light up the connections based on the mammal connectome. Since leaving brain mapping, I now run Dopamine Labs, where we use AI and neuroscience to make apps more addictive and help people break app addiction. So I'm excited to share with you both sides of that totally awesome yet slightly schizophrenic coin this evening, and really appreciative to Todd for throwing us all together.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Vince. I'm the CEO of IV.ai. We're an AI platform. We get hired by a lot of companies like Netflix, and then we also work with the US government and Estee Lauder and businesses to basically help them make sense of what they're doing with their data. And our sweet spot is around language. So we do a lot of things that basically make it really easy to make sense of a lot of information that's been spoken or put through in some other way through some kind of human language. I've been working in space for the last 6 or 7 years, and now it's become a lot easier. If you had an AI panel like 3 years ago, you would never get a room this full. So this is really awesome, and congrats to Todd for putting it all together. Yeah.
Go back to Stephen. I'm going to start off with Stephen has a PhD from Caltech, so I thought that you would be the best person to start off to tell us, AI has been used as a buzzword, everywhere now. I feel like people just call anything AI now when it could be predictive analytics or it could be just, automation, simple automation or statistics even. So I thought, why don't you tell us what AI is and what it isn't?
Okay, sure. I mean, AI is kind of like VR. It's like, it sort of is what people call it. There's no hard definition. It's also gone through a lot of historical transitions. And also, it's not the first wave. It's like AI made money in the 60s and it didn't make money for a while. It came back in the early 80s. And then everyone hated it. And now they love it again. So it comes in and out of vogue. A lot of things that used to be AI are no longer AI. A good example of this is like optical character recognition. Being able to take a book and read it. Used to be AI, not AI. It's a simple algorithm. I guess one definition of AI is like getting computers to do things to replicate human intelligence, and that's certainly how the field started. Of course, as it's happened, once we manage to teach a computer to play chess, and you look at how it does it, you're like, oh, it's a game tree and a lookup table. It's not like intelligence anymore. So I think it's hard to say. It means different things to different people. Today, when people talk about AI, they're talking about machine learning and basically statistical mechanisms for finding patterns in huge amounts of data. Most of the success of today's AI is actually based on CPU speed, memory, and cheap disk. The fact that we can actually process, we're using algorithms that are 20 years old, they're no more intelligent than they were 20 years ago. But because we can put so much more data through, we can do so much more with them. So I think there are just multiple definitions of AI, and those are a few of them. Yeah.
Anyone touch base? Ramsay?
So I love your definition. There's this old adage in robotics that anything that used to be a robot is now just a machine. So it was the case that in the 50s, you had the automated washing robot in the home, and now it's just a dishwasher. Anything that is cutting edge in terms of a task that a human used to do, whether that's physical or cognitive, we call AI or a robot. But the second that we can break it down into its constituent pieces, and we realize that a lot of neural processes are just these heuristics or rule sets, we realize that maybe this wasn't something spooky or special. Anyway, so I like your definition because it places it in a good historical context, and it also branches from the metaphysical of just code to the physical. There's a good basis for robotics in that definition too.
Ramsay, why you still have the mic? I mean, you just talked about how, for your company, you're using neuroscience and AI to help businesses make their hack human behavior and make more apps more addictive. Then, basically, would you consider yourself a new digital drug dealer now? And on top of that, really, what was I saying? Yeah, digital drug dealer for sure. So but why do you believe that persuasive technology is beneficial to society and not judgmental and not like a dystopia?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I came from the behavioral sciences, particularly the neuroscience underneath how addictions and motivated behaviors work. Because neuroscience is huge, everything ranging from AI to cellular physiology, genetics, vision, all in it. But I came from motivated behavior. And I was looking this up today. 100 years ago, the things that killed people overwhelmingly in the industrial world were infectious diseases and pathogens that we barely even had names for yet. And this is what you died of. That was it. You died of things totally outside of your control. But we developed a rigorous technology of the body, medicine, sanitation, sterilization, immunization techniques. And in a really shockingly short amount of time compared to the human history, we doubled life expectancy and we cut infant mortality by half. Today, what's going to kill people in the post-industrial world is ennui and cheeseburgers. It is habits. It is type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, obesity, anxiety, and stress-related illness. These are things that have an overwhelming quantity of habit basis to them. And it's no surprise, your brainstem is wired for scarcity. You came up in this world evolutionarily with uncertain future food sources and an almost omnipresent predator. So you are wired to be a little more anxious and gorge every time you eat. And that's not bad, it's not wrong, it's just what mammals had to go through to get here. But that's not what our life is like anymore, but that's still what our habits are like. So as we look at why we're here, why we're gonna die of cheeseburgers and ennui this year more than anything else, it's because we have this abundance of kilobytes and kilocalories and kilowatts, all the things that post-scarcity is getting us, but our wiring is still ancient. So if we're going to take seriously how we overcome our evolutionary past and move forward like sensibly into post-scarcity, we need a rigorous technology of the mind. So what worked 100 years ago about the body, I think we need today, and I think persuasive technology, the idea that our phones and our devices can know our behavior and then use insights from neuro to push back against us, to shape us, to become the kind of people we want to become, is how we sensibly move forward through that. So the dystopia story is really clear. It involves a Hammerbacher who left Facebook saying the greatest minds of my generation are finding ways to make people click on more ads, and that sucks. That's the obvious dystopia here, but the utopia I think is very thin. And for every time that we talk about Huxley and Brave New World, we forget that he also wrote The Island, which we can take these exact same technologies and exact same techniques and find ways to align them to human needs. So look at what it would look like if you adhere to your diet app better, your running app better, if you meditated more with that app on your phone, and if that app had techniques to get you to do that more. That looks like how you fix this at scale. So that's why we think this is worth working on and why this is more utopia than dystopia.
Beautiful. You pass it? Or you go?
I just have a quick follow-up question because it's super interesting. I'm sorry, I know this is your role, Todd.
Do it.
Do you only accept clients where you believe that the addictive app that you're creating is like beneficial to society, and how do you make that judgment?
Yes, and I'm not the person to. So first, we won't work with people who are abjectly making something that's going to hurt people. So we turn down things like casinos, what people call gaming, they really mean casinos. We work with just for fun games. I grew up playing games. I'm perfectly comfortable giving people that release. It was a huge part of my narrative, and I think it's a huge part of the future. We also can't pretend we're the internet's thought police. It's not my job to decide which technology should have this or don't. So we release apps to help people break any app addiction they want. Because at the end of the day, I want people to have the tools available to live in the kind of mind they want to, and then use state-of-the-art techniques to build that mind, even if that means they know these things are affecting their behavior so they can take countermeasures proactively. It's no one's job to be that thought police.
I want to go to Vince. So Vince has been super busy. He actually just flew in from Washington today. Thank you for taking the place of a few other panels that sadly couldn't make it tonight. But, so you've been building a lot of different chatbots for like everything from Aero Mexico, Airlines for customer service, Cons Lions. You made even headlines in a lot of publications about what you did at Cons for their festival app, and then you even developed something for the cult artist Poppy, 20th Century Fox Prison Break, Sony Pictures is a Resident Evil, and I don't know if I'm missing anything, but basically chatbots have been overhyped since I think the beginning of 2016. And so now I know that the hype curve is kind of like we've come down to the point where the hype is kind of gone. But there's like over 10,000 plus different types of chatbots on different platforms out there. So I guess why are all these big brands coming to you? What makes your chatbots different? And tell us more.
That's a really good question. We aren't a chatbot company, so like we don't build chatbots as the main thing that we do. We build like backends. So we are mostly machine learning experts, and we just build models that are good at processing information to make interesting experiences. And one of the first avenues that companies usually go through when they are considering machine learning is they're like, oh, that's a chatbot, therefore we should do a chatbot. So for us, that's fine because a chatbot can be a really great mechanism for research and also for testing out theories in relation to a model. But for us, the chatbot isn't like the end goal. So that's why they're coming to us, because it's actually, because we're quite good at building them because we just think of them as like interfaces with an audience.
Awesome. From there, we're gonna go to Mark. So Mark, you've been working at Pixar for almost 2 decades. So you have an amazing background on developing characters and personalities. And so now with your new company, Emotional AI, tell us more about how, with your experience of developing these animated characters that we all love, I mean, you helped work on it, obviously, you had a big role on Ratatouille. I don't know if there's anyone in this room that, if you've seen Ratatouille, who here didn't want to become a better chef or a better cook, right, after watching that show. Started watching those, we all wanted to become better just because this little rat was able to, make these amazing, dishes. Either way, that, you were able, Pixar has an amazing ability to make these characters identifiable and emotional. and authentic, so that we actually, can relate to them. So how are you using that type of strategy and that type of thought process to build out, AI avatars and basically authentic AIs today?
Well, it's interesting. Another character I did was Dory in Finding Nemo, and thought is everything in that, right? When something is happening here. What? And you can see the thoughts going by on the face, and that's pretty much what we do. It's there's been a lot of studies that vary, but the favorite ones that I'll use now will say, like, human communication is 90% visual. There's a reason we all came out here tonight instead of watching this online, right? I'm sure this would be a great podcast, right? But we came here because we know the value of the face, right? When each of us are meeting each other beforehand, if I meet you right now, I can be like, what's your name?
I'm Heather.
Heather, it's really great to meet you. Or I can do this, what's your name?
Heather.
It's really great to meet you, Heather. Thanks for coming. Right? I just told something to Heather that was completely different, and she knows that. We all know that, right? We all know that there's a much more important communication that's happening, right? So we prefer the face, and it's a zero-sum game. You can either do a great job with it, and we can improve our relationship and keep in touch, or I can wreck it, right? If I don't know what I'm doing, if I stare at your ear the whole time, yeah, Heather, it's been really great. Yeah, I'm really glad, right? Have you guys all seen those movies? The ones that they're motion captured. You've seen Tom Hanks and his eyes look kind of dead. Have you guys heard of the uncanny valley?
Yeah.
It's a visual uncanny valley, right? Where you're like, it looks real, but there's something not quite right. What I found in my time at Pixar is that there's interaction. There's a character uncanny valley. And if you're talking to somebody and they don't seem authentic, if they don't seem real, then it doesn't just make you seem like, oh, they're okay. It does, which would be great. That would be awesome if that was true for all of us here tonight, right? We've met a lot of people, right? I would like to think that I'm like medium-sized acceptable, right? But if you do a bad job, or just even a minorly bad job, like if I stare at your ear while we're doing this, right? You will actually quite dislike me, right? If you mess up, you really mess up, right? So when we talk about AI, it's non-visual. Of course I'm going to want a face with that. All right, well now you're in my zone. Because now you have the power to wreck your brand with a horrible interaction with somebody who's staring at your ear, or in the kind of the game like, home pose, creeping around, right? Or you have the ability to make somebody feel comfortable using skills that make them feel like they want to talk with you more, they want to engage with you more. So I'm really curious about what you do, Ramsay, because it's like, similarly, I'm on the body language end of designing things specifically to create body language that invites more interaction, that invites closeness, empathy, emotional understanding, to build a relationship long-term over time. Because just having the mouth move with the AI is actually not scalable, and it's not that interesting to me. Like being able to build relationships and the skill set that we're all using when we meet each other tonight, to turn that into an AI, that's actually quite interesting for me. So that's what emotional AI does.
Awesome, thank you.
Who's next?
Seth, let's go to you. So you have an interesting career path. You first started off as an entrepreneur assistant at WME, to then Goldman Sachs. So then you were hired by Facebook to lead their their Messenger developer platform, and see Messenger separate to a new app. But then now you went back to the investment world, and now as an investor for Greylock, Greylock.
Everyone in LA does that.
It's around the corner from me, so sorry about that. Greylock. So with your experience with messaging, and I know you're very focused on the AR and VR world right now, where do you really see like chatbots? Like we're talking about chatbots, the biggest hype. You helped really create that whole ecosystem. Where do you see them today? Where do you see them tomorrow? And how do you see AI assistants or chatbots, or however you want to call them, transfer from basically this conversational type of era to a more immersive era to then later will be a more cognitive age?
Yeah, that's a good question. I leave the Goldman Sachs off my resume when I talk to people in Silicon Valley. They don't like it. But it's a good question. I mean, in some ways, you can partly blame me for the overhype of chatbots in 2016. I was on the stage at F8, with other people, and talking about how I was going to change the world. It's funny because Vince was saying we're not a chatbot company, and in 2016 everyone started their company like bots.chatbot, right? Like everyone was a chatbot company. It like tripled your valuation. But now, and you know, because I'm an investor now, and so I meet with a lot of companies, everyone says the same thing as Vince, is like, we're not a chatbot company, is what they open with. I'm sure Vince is authentic in that, but yeah.
Yeah, but totally. Like
Yeah.
there were like 50 bot platforms in every country as well. It
Yeah.
wasn't just here. It was like every country had like ton. It was like, why would you make another bot platform? You know, it just did not make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the reason why everyone was so excited about it was not just because, you know, I was like a handsome speaker at F8, although I'm sure that played a role. no, but the reason people were so excited about it was because it was promising to solve a real problem, right? And part of that was actually around the combination of how powerful messaging has become in everyone's lives. It's kind of the digital way that you communicate with people that you're close with, as well as this distribution problem for technology on mobile, which is that the way that the App Store ended up being set up, just based on a few decisions that were made by Apple and Google, is it's an app model where you download software to your phone, and it works really well for the 5 or 10 things that you use every day. But for the long tail of things that you may want to use to interact with digitally that happen maybe once a month or less frequently, there's just no kind of low friction way to do that. You know, whether it's if you travel less frequently, whether it's getting your boarding pass or, you know, communicating with the real world, like messaging your fridge or...
Isn't that what websites are for?
Yeah, yes, but on mobile it doesn't work as well. It's a bit clunky. The mobile web, it doesn't have payments or identity built in. There's a lot of things that make apps better than mobile websites. They're getting better for sure. But that was part of the promise of chatbots, and I think what got everyone excited about it was not... And what ended up being conflated, I think, was the promise of increased distribution for digital products, the amazing amount of engagement on messaging, and then this concept of conversational interfaces and natural language processing. And those things ended up getting conflated, and what ended up happening was people thought that, you know, a conversational interface is the best way to build software and to do everything in your life, like from everything from like a dating app to booking hotels to other things. But it turns out that like a command line interface, a text-based interface, is actually pretty inefficient to get a lot of things done. There's a reason why graphical user interfaces were built, because it's just simpler to use. And so the promise of distribution was a little bit disconnected with kind of was tied too closely with the concept of conversational interfaces, which are only good for certain use cases, like for example, automating customer service. So what makes me really excited about it going forward, and what we were really excited about while I was at Facebook and we were building towards, is how can you actually take all these conversations that are happening and make it frictionless to get things that you want done. So in my group message, I'm planning dinner, right? I'm planning movies with my friends. I'm planning trips with my family. And imagine if, as I'm talking, it can understand my intent of the conversation and say, here are the movie times tonight, and you just tap it and it's done, and it's social, and it's frictionless. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about, and I think that will kind of bring together a lot of the promises of distribution and messaging engagement without kind of the, I guess, annoyance of trying to plug graphical user interfaces into conversational interfaces. And I have more to say, but I don't want to take up too much time. Yeah.
Steven, I want to go back to you. I see
Are you sure?
Yeah, for sure. I want to hear your opinion on all this, what you believe on AI and the hype surrounded by the chatbots, and just what people have been talking about already, and from your experience and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a strong believer in what Seth says about the limitations of conversational UI. I actually recently wrote an essay about this, where people think talking is like this, you know, ultimate solution. The fluidity of using your hands and being able to touch buttons, you know, just being able to like hit a button for something, see a visual display of many, many items, as opposed to having hear it. There's a lot to be said there. I'm not sure if I have anything to say about that, except that, like, I guess if you imagine all the stuff that's happened with natural language processing and all the machinery that's gone into making this chat experience powered by artificial intelligence, imagine if we applied the same things to high frequency, high octane interfaces, right? What's a high octane interface? Like using your mobile phone, flipping through photos, Google Images. Google Images is my example of this, right? They're using AI to drive a graphical thing. And you see so many pictures so quickly, right? And so when I look at all these conversational interfaces coming and these great things that are driving it, I'm like, awesome, I can't wait till that drives something better than conversation, you know, in terms of like a higher bandwidth back and forth. So I guess that's the thing that I have to say here. Yeah.
More like towards like the whole a visual avatar talking back and forth. So instead of typing something, it's all voice and visual things. Or what are you talking about?
So I'm also thinking about AR, VR, all these like future hyper-rich ways of interacting. The avatar to me is like a antiquated bug we have in our brain that's been implanted by living with human beings. You know, it's like people have been thinking about the avatar for so long. It's like, well, computers in the future will be just like people. Wouldn't that be great? It turns out if you look at what computation can actually do, it does all kinds of things that people can't. You know, the simplest example is like, you know, you go back to ENIAC, like being able to add numbers really quickly, right? It's like computers do very, very different kinds of things. And, you know, having the whole interface of what the graphical interface can provide just leads to very different kinds of solutions. So people are still dreaming of avatars. You know, I don't dream of an avatar, just like this robot point. You know, it's like, why have a robot where you can have a dishwasher? Why does everything have to be anthropomorphic? So I think we're all like stuck. A lot of people get stuck in this, like, it's like there's a bug in the brain of like, oh, it's got to be anthropomorphic. That's the, like, even the term artificial intelligence is like, oh, it's like making computers have natural intelligence. I think the opposite is going to occur. I think we're going to start to see humans as less and less and less intelligent. The more I've learned about AI, the less intelligent I see humans being. So when you look at the computer interface of the future, I don't think it's going to be conversation. I think if we're using our voice, maybe we'll have hyper abbreviated languages. We'll be using our bodies. We'll have neural implants. You know, that'll also be pretty mechanical. You know, for the first few generations in terms of like, you know, this sort of be thinking we're moving. But we're going to see all these higher bandwidth things happening. Instead of looking at like how much something's like reality, when sort of evaluating a new kind of interaction, I think about what's the bandwidth? How much can I communicate to the machine? How much can the machine communicate to me? How quickly can I select and manipulate things? And I think that's what AI is going to be driving, not sort of replicating what we have already.
So more Skynet, less Cortana.
Certainly less Cortana. I mean, who uses Cortana?
I meant the actual representation of the avatar in the game Halo.
Okay.
Okay. Not the speech.
Yeah.
But in terms of where you see AI going, you're thinking more Skynet and cybernetics and
I also think Skynet
webware and not Cortana and the Master Chief.
Yeah, I also think Skynet is a model. So Skynet is a Terminator. You know, it's like this big AI consortium. I think that's also, I mean, it's a 20, 30-year-old reference, so of course it's going to be a little outdated. But the Skynet model is one of great centralization. And, you know, I don't think, people think, well, we'll have a metaverse. This question of, is there going to be some metaverse we all live in? This is a sci-fi idea of this big conglomerate that we're all plugged into. That's not what digital enables. Digital enables lots of different silos of computation, information, and knowledge. So I don't think we'll be living under an all-encompassing Skynet. I think there'll be more proliferation of technologies and actors and agents all sort of competing. More of an ecosystem, I think. So, yeah.
Ramsay, you want to say?
Yeah. I'm actually going to come out swinging on behalf of Mark on this one. That I don't think we're going to get rid of the avatars. So you go look back at the social historical evolution of the species and of culture, and exactly as both you were saying, almost like identically past one another, we do a lot with our hands. And a lot of fantastic neuroscientists have proposed that part of what drove language evolution was the coevolution with digit control regions of the brain, such that we were able to more fine-grainedly communicate to each other symbolically using motor skills, appeared to have this recurrent bootstrap effect with simple languages, then complex symbols, simple strings, abstract representation. For the same reason also that you said, we didn't live stream this tonight, we came here. There is something deeply high bandwidth communicative about having physical presence and embodiment. We take that, and the fact that a lot of people here came on a Thursday evening to come listen to 5 white male nerds with beards talk about AI. This is an early adopter problem. Everybody here is lightly somewhere on the early adopter part of the chasm crossing product adoption lifecycle curve. The idea that all humans want interfaces over humans, I think, might suffer from the early adopter innovator perspective problem. My mom would permanently prefer to have a conversation with someone, and if that thing is an avatar or an Alexa, and maybe not chatbot, let's be fair, chat interfaces totally suck. Sorry. The idea that you have to constrain this exactly as you said, there's a reason to move to GUI, but the idea that we could take what AI is good at about pattern recognition and context detection and give people the same interface that we've built humanity with, conversation, human connection, presence, not looking at each other's ears, that I think is what you get going forward that will get mass adoption. Beyond it worked in the Bay, I think tools that actually meet people historically where we are in terms of the emotional richness of experience, we can't ignore the importance of presence, of embodiment, of eye contact, of these things that have historically made it rich. So what I posit is that for a lot of people, they're gonna keep wanting these things that appear antiquated in what humans are good at because they're still gonna be humans.
But that's what other humans are for.
Right, but the whole point is then we get to couple the things machines are good at, lookup, infinite memory, precision, and high-speed communication with the things that humans need. Contact, personification, embodiment. To say that we must have one without the other, it feels unimaginative. We can get the best of both worlds here. What Mark is working on is the best of both worlds here. Do embodiment right, and do the net right. We don't need to pretend we permanently have to interact with touchscreens if we get this right. And we don't need to pretend we permanently also just must know what humans know organically. There are good ways to couple these. So I'm hoping that's the case moving forward.
Give me that. No, I think that there's truth to all of it, if I may. And I would thank you for being defensive, but I think that there's truth to all of it. Would I want an implant in my brain that could do things quickly? Sure.
When you look at HAL 9000 from 2001, do you think that's the computer of the future? Do you think that?
That HAL might be something
HAL
that
9000 is the computer of the future.
It's not a stretch given the state of Alexa. Now, hopefully it's not murderous.
So,
let's not have it be murderous.
I'm sorry to steal it from you. I just feel
Please, that's a good conversation.
Let's not have it be murderous.
He was rebutting what I said,
Yes.
I think I should get a chance.
We want conversation, we don't want murder.
Sure, that was an evil robot. And I think, in terms of what, I don't know I haven't seen what you're doing, Mark. I think that avatars have a huge role in things like entertainment. I think you can't look at something like entertainment and movies and think we're not going to be wanting to see faces, interacting with faces in game worlds. There's a whole sensational layer on entertainment experiences. It's cultural, it's subjective. And I don't necessarily think we disagree. But it's interesting conversation for the group. Sure. But if you look at productivity, if you look at information and getting things done, it's nice to hear that my ride's coming. It's nice to hear what the route will be. It's even better to see a picture of it in an instant, And I think my position is more against this, the rigidity of this avatar-based concept doesn't seem to allow for these advances of things that humans could never do. So an example, imagine that I had a TV screen on my face. I don't know if anyone reads Saga. Who here reads Saga, the comic book? Got it? We got one back there. Saga's an amazing graphic novel, they call it, comic book. Fiona Staples, Brian K. Vaughan, beautiful. The character there called Prince Robot the Four, he has a TV screen on his face. And when he's upset, you see a nuclear bomb on his face. When, he has certain thoughts come across as a little bit tyrannic at times. They use it wonderfully for fictive reasons. I think if I could have a TV screen on my face that I could control with my thought, I could speak so much more. So much more if I could drive a display.
This is why emojis
if I could simply drive this with my brain and pull up images and stuff as I'm talking. So if you look at the form factor of a human being, having a screen that could be driven, it's within technological possibility. So why would we limit ourselves to the face? The face is important, not going anywhere, but there's so much more other than that.
That's a good comment, absolutely.
May I jump in? I would agree with both of you. I think that there's we all talk with each other, we use each other's faces to glean information, and we use our phones all the time. like nobody's saying like I can't talk to you anymore. I have to use my phone instead. I will only accept an emoji from you as far as communication. Right? And I think the fact remains, like what you just said just now, like it will go on, and you had a question I want to respond to, but or Todd, you should, but look, we've been basing the interface is called that for a reason, and we've been basing everything off of this for like how many years? A millennia?
All of them.
A millennia, right?
Since we had
That's
faces, we've been doing it this
the
way.
typing, this is 100 years old, right?
At best.
At best. And this is what, 20 years old at best, right? What's gonna win? Right? Like, no matter what, whether you like it or not.
That's no argument. That's no argument.
Why not?
Why not? I mean, we heated our house with fire for a long time. We don't do that now.
So you're telling me that I could just do this and talk to you and you would feel fine because you're used to your computer now and I can just do this and you feel fine?
I mean,
I can handle it. Yeah. I can handle it. I promise you this question would be entertaining.
No, I agree that it's both, but I don't think that it's going to go away is all I'm saying. And I think that there is a danger that when people do represent avatars with it, this is why I entered the field, because I originally wanted to do this in VR. I wanted to be in the cantina in Star Wars and be able to order a drink from the guy. And I was frustrated that the technology was so horrific. But and maybe that will be used for entertainment, that's totally true. But when somebody puts that in front of you and it's like, hello, it is really great to see your ear. Would you like to do something special today, like perhaps join us at Farmers Insurance, which makes you go like, Farmers Insurance is a nightmare, right? When you do that, like Farmers Insurance is not helping itself at all, right? Like if you're going to use it for customer service, if you're going to use it for that kind of stuff, at least do it with some elegance of like trying to build a decent interaction without frightening everybody with like, are you Sarah Connor kind of like behavior that this stuff really looks like to me.
Question, yes, sir.
So you use the analogy of the HAL 9000 interface. What about the computer interface from Star Trek Next Generation, where you're talking to the computer, you can do things for it, and even generate a holodeck? Even that might be
Yeah.
The Next Generation is an amazing touchpoint.
Please don't interpret what I'm saying. The conversation won't have a role. For command-based things and dictation, I mean, there are many uses for conversational UI. I just think that it's going to continue to be a small player, And as it grows and gets better, all these other things are getting better as well. And with the functional foundation, I don't know what's going to happen. It's very surprising. One of my greatest surprises is why we use the mouse. A pen, the stylus. Ivan Sutherland, the same person who made the first head mount in the late 50s, made the stylus. And the mouse was invented a decade later. And you could say, it's so much more natural. People have been using styluses and writing instruments since cuneiform. That's clearly what we're going to do. This is your argument repeated back. But we use the mouse. We use the mouse. Why? It sucks. It's like, I used it upside down for the first year with the tail pointing the wrong way because my neighbor did it that way and that's why I learned. My mom held it like this and was like, wait, how do I move the cursor? I was like, you got to put it on the table, Mom. But we use it. Why? Because even doing stuff in VR, you're like, sometimes you want a mouse because of that precision. You can click a 12 by 12 pixel icon on your, super 4K screen. It's just like your 3D modeling, you need to get that point in a cluster point. You can just it has this functional affordance that allows you to do stuff you couldn't do. And I hear these points about feeling good, and I know things have to feel good, but behavioral I've seen over and over again in my career. The technology that delivers, that allows us to function, process information, communicate, do stuff more rapidly, dominates. These ideas were really popular in the late 90s. Who here knows about Microsoft Bob? Microsoft Bob, right? In the late 90s, computers were difficult to use. So Microsoft was like, we're going to redo Windows and it'll look just like your house. And when your email comes, you'll walk your little avatar out to the mailbox to get it, and people will understand it. And your files will live in the filing cabinet. And if you want to watch a movie, you'll walk over to the TV set. And it's just like, this stuff might feel good. It's awesome. If I'm playing a video game, I want that. That's how I want to do it when I'm playing Halo. But, for getting stuff done, it turns out that, Gmail just happens to be better. So, that's some of the evidence I used as a foundation for how I think.
Yeah, just a quick comment, because I think this is a very interesting conversation. to Ramsay, to use your point that you alluded to earlier of how people envisioned the robot that washed dishes as a human over the sink hand washing dishes for you, whereas it actually became the washing machine. And I think that's a good analogy, which is basically, I think it's actually slightly uncreative to try to digitize the old school system. And when you're designing software, I think most people here will agree with this, you want to, or any type of technology, you want to start from first principles. What's the most efficient way to get whatever you're trying to do done? And that doesn't always mean kind of projecting the analog or the human experience in every or even most cases. A lot of it is what are you actually trying to accomplish, and then how can you use technology in the most powerful way? And often that doesn't look like what we're used to in terms of like analogies from 100 years ago.
It's not just.
Yeah, exactly.
One of those gets for the end.
Having built, hundreds of millions of conversations through conversational interfaces, the thing that does come into play really well is the button. Like giving someone the option to kind of is basically like a pause button, or like I'm gonna hit here and then I'm gonna come back in, and then needing to be in the linear thread of the conversation, which can be confusing. So I think that, I think there'll be place for both, even though I have a horse in the race, I totally agree with you. And also there's, kids today don't like to communicate verbally. It's like they're being trained away. They've been trained to buttons. They've been trained to home screens and in hamburger menus. And so it's like, we will have to retrain again. But we trained out of that too. We trained to the button, so it could go either way.
That's why you still got it. I want to quickly ask you about emotional analytics, right? Because you've been working on some, what was it? At cons, you did a bartender, emotional bartender, right? That would basically observe your behavior after you drank the first drink, and based off that, your expressions on your face, your micro expressions, serve you up another drink. I guess a little bit on that, because it goes on to the whole point of that we're observing our behaviors and our facial expressions that then give new outputs.
Yeah, it's an interesting / creepy thing. So I've been working with this company for the last kind of 4 or 5 years that's been doing this, which is basically a lot of these type of companies are ending up as research companies where we play you a video, you watch the video on a screen, you're paid in a research pool, we record your reaction, and then we see your micro expressions as you're watching the thing, which is interesting in relation to how the person really feels about the thing they've just seen. But it's also kind of hard to make sense of, because in the production process, you're not considering the true emotion of the person that's watching it. And often the way that we interpret things isn't actually how we feel about them, it's the way we want to be perceived by our vote. So we did this for fun. We do a lot of these things just to kind of show some of these different aspects of machine learning so that we can explain it to people so they can get a better idea, basically, so we can do our job better. So in Cannes, we had a bartender where basically you show up to the bar, there were 3 humans behind the bar making the drinks, and then the people would come, they have a sip, and then based on their reaction, they would get the next drink. The idea was we're going to get the optimal drink for the drunk people, which is we're basically saving the world. Yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, we built this bot for that event as well with the festival, and it was really interesting because you just had all these really senior kind of C-level people at these different corporations using a bot, often for the first time, but really kind of people that are thinking about conversation and usually have quite a good vocabulary. And we had this search function where you could type whatever you wanted in and it would answer your question. And people were keyword searching. So they were kind of jumping back and trying to think of what they needed to do for the machine in order to facilitate the conversation. But even though they were able to write whatever they wanted.
Next thing I guess for everyone is about, so.
That is your question.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question to you, and it's funny you brought up micro expressions. One of the things I wanted to ask is because you mentioned having a screen for a face and maybe a bomb or for show anger.
Mm-hmm.
But couldn't you say, and I guess this goes to where can you read the screen? Now,
Seth.
the guy with the awesome hat.
Ramsay.
Yeah. Sorry. But he said with emotions and behaviors, I'm kind of siding with him on this, but wouldn't it be that we as human beings have an instinct? Someone raising their eyebrow to show interest, micro expressions, facial expressions, those kind of transmit immediately some sort of a message. Couldn't you say that
You got it from your mom or your dad when you were born. It was the first thing
Yeah,
that
they're
you
like,
saw,
"Oh,
and you're going to
so,
replace
it's a
that with a
boy."
video. I'm sorry, like you're programmed like that from the minute you were born. And I don't think that you can easily say that that won't exist somewhere in the mix.
So
I agree that it will be there, but it will be in the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think instinct is something that we're born with, and there's things we pick up on certain cues.
It's not instinct. I mean, you actually have low-level neural hardware to detect. And I'll pass it on to Ramsay to finish this up because he's way more neuroscience. I'm computer science, not neuroscience, for the record. It's and I'm not arguing that faces will disappear.
Yeah.
I'm imagining the screen on top of your face, not over it.
Yeah.
There's also a ton of interesting work going on right now. I mean, everyone's used Snapchat and seen how they can put stuff on your face and exaggerate it.
Yeah.
There's no reason that they couldn't see certain exaggerations digitally produced that would trigger some of these physiological responses. But I think I'm going to relate a couple points Ramsay and Vince said, because I think they're both relevant to this, and I'm going to pass it on down. We have sockets, like the electrical socket. It has like 2 eyes and a mouth. It actually triggers in young children the same cells that detect faces, and that's, as I understand, built in.
Adults too.
You're born like it's not nurture, it's nature, right? And that's important. But the other point was something Vince mentioned, which is neuroplasticity, which is the fact that your brain can change a lot, and developmentally you change what you can and can't do. And I think that faces are important, not going anywhere until we start genetically engineering our brains like crazy, which is century plus, I think, to get to that point. So I'm not going to think about that. But at the same time, we have this whole neuroplasticity layer. And so you can see new generations coming out. Maybe in 200 years, people won't even talk at all because they'll have some kind of implant or something that allows them to speak more efficiently, right? Like at the speed of typing instead of the speed that I type as a programmer, instead of the speed of speaking. So I think those factor in, and I'm just going to see what these guys have to say about it.
Yeah, actually, wait, hold on. What the? Okay, cool. About half you looked back. That is reflex. That part is actually wired. This is shared social attention. It's this thing that we do in our prefrontal cortex and ventromedial PFC. Those kinds of things, hardwired. Face recognition, hardwired. Micro expressions around like the upturn of smile or pupil dilation for fear or arousal, hardwired. Almost all of the rest is culturally programmed, but from a very young age. So, Mark, to your point, when we be careful with the word instinct, a lot of that has strong geographic, cultural, SES components to it that we ought to acknowledge as part of the beautiful complexity of doing all this as humans. But there are a lot of the pieces that are deeply hardwired.
Yeah.
So to your point, when we look at what's going on inside the head there, I don't think they're going away. Also, when you talk about the reflex speed, like your speed of detection between having to parse a visual scene and see an atom bomb versus when your gut clenches when you see someone's eyes start dilating a little, you're looking at orders of magnitude better speed on some of these more reflex-oriented things.
You want to keep going?
I have nothing to.
I feel like we covered it there, did we?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you could just say a little bit about neuroplasticity and how that relates to conversational UI or the UIs we might have, and maybe some generational shifts. I mean, I was interested to hear more about that, I guess.
So it's interesting in relation to like the mechanism of the conversation. So like verbal communication and audio, it can feel quite intimate. Often that creates this kind of level of trust, and so that you feel like more calm with the information you're taking in and what you're willing to share as well. It's really early still. I think people like communicating through conversations, just like, especially with free text, is just so far to go. And when you work with like an Alexa or a Home, which we do sometimes, you don't get access to the audio. So you don't get all that really rich data, which is, what's going on for frequencies, how are they changing, how is this person actually feeling based on what their voice is doing. I wish I could tell you, but I think it's going to be interesting.
If I may, just for the panel, because we're talking so much about this intersection of like being very human and being very machine. The Turing test is not just like the giant thought experiment about genuinely intelligent machines, but they actually run a Turing test each year where they bring in chatbots from research institutes and from startups to try to test whether or not we have sentient machines. So far, nothing's passed, fortunately. But every year they run the meta tests for the most human AI and then the most human or the most robot-like human, the people who are near misses to the judges. Every year they have to disqualify at least a few candidates for the AI side who wrote robots that are abjectly offensive. Like every third thing out of their mouth is an F-bomb. And when you have a robot who's really salty, you assume it's a human. Because we all have the narrative in our heads that robots are like these machines of loving grace that are always super gentle and kind and helpful and subservient, C-3PO bullshit. It turns out if you just make a salty ass like 4chan 12-year-old robot, people overwhelmingly think it's a human. So they de facto have to disqualify at least a few candidates each year who made just like dick bots. Which is like the worst trash kind of.
But it's
like,
not a chatbot company.
Not a chatbot. These music research groups are high schoolers.
It's learning.
But that should say something about us. It should say something about us that like we have these detectors for this like social metacognition about like, wow, a robot wouldn't be a dick to me. You want to make a really real robot? They can say things about their mom.
Your mama robot?
Yeah.
Your mama robot. Your mama bot. That's a good question.
One question just along those lines. I read somewhere that there was an AI that started to develop its own language, and so they shut it down. So I was just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I thought we were going to talk about what happens when Microsoft Research launched Tay and 4chan got a hold of it. Problem about, like, so there's a lot of people in neuroscience say, like, we learn language based on statistical frequencies of sounds and phonemes and phrases and memes. But what you're describing was a small experiment at Facebook's AI research group in which Microsoft Research was the AI communication. They had a recent one like this at Facebook, where it appears that two of the agents in like an AI chatbot agent conversation started communicating in things that weren't words anymore, but they were just short and truncated words and patterns of repeating nonsense in ways that lent themselves well towards having grammatical structure. So what they did is they, using kind of off-the-shelf components they already had on hand for their instruction set, they started building slang. They basically just built robot slang. And the problem with this and why they shut it down wasn't because it was dangerous per se, but for the idea of like Bostrom's hard containment problem. If we don't know what the AIs are doing, shut it the fuck down. That's just it.
That was Facebook, sorry.
That was Facebook. Yeah.
Also, it's a great PR story.
Super great PR story. Facebook Labs shuts down sentient robots. Like, that gets you on BuzzFeed. But it was just, they started developing slang. No one will ever be able to tell really what they were saying, and they probably weren't saying anything, because it's easy to work out grammar rules without high-dimensional semantics. Words have to point to things and have reference, but you can arrange sentences that grammatically make sense, like do colorless green dreams sleep furiously is a grammatically sensible sentence that has no referent, and that's what they were doing.
And so I guess the question is, why shut that down instead of letting it?
PR story.
PR story, bad use of resources, and containment. In the event they are doing something, shut it down. If we don't know what they're doing, shut it down.
All right, guys. Last question for everyone. Should be a good discussion. So, Andrew, I always mess up when you NG. So, Ng. Yeah. So Andrew Ng, co-founder of Coursera, former head of they do AI, says they know AI is the new electricity, right? So just as electricity transformed almost everything 100 years ago, today every industry will be transformed by AI in the next several years. So, for everyone, what are your hopes and fears about the future? Do you believe AI is going to replace us or complement us? And just your feeling about where we are now, where we're going with AI, and there you go. Anyone wants to start off?
Yeah, I've got a microphone and I'll shut up quick. So when we transitioned in factories, in the industrial world, in cities, from having a central crankshaft in the middle of the factory floor that you aligned all your workstations against, that you could distribute force to the workstations to do mechanical work with, when we transitioned from that world of like falling water, mechanical power, then to motion into a factory, to electricity, it took the majority of factory floors about 50 years to modernize their layouts and change how they did stuff at the most basic level of organizing work before they could really fully leverage the new advent of electric power. I bring this up because to me that says when we look at everything we think AI is going to revolutionize, yes, it's very new, it's the new electricity, but it took electricity 50 fucking years in industrial plants before it actually made a huge difference in terms of the fundamental way we structure how we do what we do. AI might have that same adoption curve. It's going to be super neat and lots of little toy things for a long time. But in terms of revolutionizing legitimate whole sectors of the human economy, it's going to take a while. And in terms of whether or not it's going to replace us, I'm increasingly becoming bearish that it will. I pray to God it doesn't, because to keep it well aligned with us in our incentive structures has a lot of philosophical problems. And coming from the neuroscience first principles perspective, knowing the current state of the art, I'm glad Elon Musk is so excited about neural lace, but the chance of these things going very like BMI, brain-machine interface very soon, or hard AI, I'm praying to God doesn't happen. And this is coming from the dude who said he wanted to be a robot when he grew up. So I'm praying to God that's not the case.
No robots for Elon. I agree. So I think that one of the places we'll see a lot of problems with job loss is in the developing nations, in kind of the Philippines and in India with call centers. Right now, within now and the next 3 years, like their economies are going to be decimated because a lot of that structured work that's being done by humans right now for about $8 to $15 an hour is going to be gone. And that was good money in that country when you're trying to figure it out. So that's a real problem, and I'm really concerned because those governments don't tend to be necessarily helpful as far as like social structure stuff. That will, I think that any job where you don't have to come up with any kind of what would be considered like a human addition to the problem, I think will be very replaceable. So just really structured jobs that are considered mundane, I think will go, like paralegals and accounting and even coding to some extent as well.
Yeah, I'm actually very optimistic about the impact of humanity with AI automating a lot of different jobs. I think every time there's change or new technology, everyone fears change and worries that those jobs that exist today are going to be automated and not exist. But what they discount is the jobs that it opens up in the future. Like, I was an investment banker, right? And before Excel and computers existed, like the old school bankers would tell us about how they're using pen and paper to like draw out financial models, right? And I imagine at the time, a lot of people said, oh, if Excel exists, then you're going to need to hire a lot fewer, financial analysts, right? Or other jobs like that. But it turned out that it actually helped expand the economy because you could do a lot more things, and then people just ended up doing a lot more things. And it also turns out that investment banking was a bad enough job as it was. Imagine if you had to use grid paper, and every time you needed to change an assumption, you had to like do the whole thing over again. It would be insane. So I actually think humans don't necessarily enjoy doing automated, data-oriented tasks. And we do that to earn a living. But if more and more of those types of jobs can be automated, it frees humans to do things that we're better at and that we enjoy more, like social things and creative things. And we're already seeing the economy move that way, where a lot of my friends, like I was in Hawaii and I was hanging out at a hotel meeting the people kind of around the pool, and they're all around my age, and everyone's like, so what do you do? And one person's like, well, I run a dog Instagram account, and he has like 5 million followers, and he has a book, and the other person's, and I worked at Facebook, and a couple other people did all these random things that like my grandpa would have no idea what we were talking about. But they're more creative in many ways. They're more fulfilling, and then AI can automate all the bad jobs. But the real key is that we need to provide people with access to opportunity and education to take advantage of some of the more creative and social jobs, because some of the menial stuff will go away, which can be a really good thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, Seth. I totally agree. I think it's going to augment society a lot. I mean, yeah, you can look at it the glass half empty is that it's going to take away a lot of jobs. It is. Like the driverless car is going to eliminate all trucking. It's going to eliminate all taxis, and everybody who's Ubering because they're on the lower end of the economic spectrum is going to be screwed. That's going to happen, right? But something else is going to open up, because before there was Uber, there was nothing. Like something else is going to open up, and it always has, and it's always going to, I think. And I also believe that it's going to, like you said, like free up our creativity, coming up with those new things. And it's going to allow society, like as soon as we were able to build fire, we come up with new things we could do with it. And I think that's going to happen here as well. It's just another stage in our evolution, and to me, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, back to the original comment, I think it's very strange for someone to say that AI is the new electricity in 2017. When we live in a world where FedEx, UPS routing packages around AI, solved that in the 70s and 80s. Stock trading been solved by AI. So many of the things, like packet routing, used to be an AI problem, the backbone of the internet. We're like 50, 60 years into this thing. I think it's just a weird statement. I mean, a hypey kind of statement. I don't know why you make a statement like that. Like we're starting this century. Let's go. It's something we've had for quite a while. I think it's back to the sort of original question. I guess the other thing that people have been talking about in terms of what will happen, I don't know what will happen, but I think we'll be conditioned to be more and more like computers. I spend a lot of time gaming and meeting people online. I love to socialize with people over video chat. I love to meet people online, and I grew up socializing on BBSs and things like that. I mean, I'm on some nerd part of some spectrum, right? Obviously. And I look at the way people communicate in those, and it's not human, all this humanity stuff that everyone here is advocating. I'm clearly on some other side of that spectrum too. But I see how we become conditioned to interact, and I have these wonderful, super efficient, amazing interactions with people all over the planet, mediated by technology. And I think if anything you say about the future, it's going to be mediated by technology. And I think it's going to be more of an adaptive force on us than we are on it. It's not about what we'll do with technology, it's about how we'll move through it. I'm really of the belief that technology sort of is more in control than humans and political structures are of what happens next. So I think the human condition of the future is one that's increasingly informed by how machines work and operate. And that's kind of what I see happening. But for me, I don't see it as a scary place. I love the kinds of interactions that I happen and the kinds of people I can meet and the levels I can connect with people I never would have met in my hometown. So I think it's a beautiful thing, but a lot of people find it scary. So, yeah.
I think that in the future, as far as with automation is concerned, the owners of the automation have a choice. They can either totally eliminate people and replace people, or they can find ways to continue to keep people and incorporate people. So for example, McDonald's doesn't have to replace all their cashiers with kiosks. They can just reduce the hours of, maybe half of the cashiers and reduce the hours of the remainder. But the choice will be with the owners.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, do they want to pay them twice as much to work as many hours? Or is this competitive economic stuff? I mean, I don't know if someone else wants to deal with this, because
Just real quick,
it's not really my thing so much in that area. But,
this is going to be dumb, but when I was at Pixar, I had my office decorated like a tiki bar. I was really serious about this, and I didn't know how to make drinks, and I was such a nerd. I was like, there must be a robotic bartender. And sure enough, for the last decade or so, or maybe more, right, there have been robotic bartenders. Would you want to go to a bar in a Mac store and have a robotic bartender make your drink? Or would you, as the customer, pay more for the experience to go into an authentic feeling place, meet a real person, and hand make a drink for you for your $12, whatever it is? I think there's always going to be a space for that. It's not just whether McDonald's wants to do it. It's like some people just won't go to McDonald's because they're going to fucking hate that. And they're going to go over to In-N-Out where they still have real people. You know what I'm saying? Like, there will still be a place for that if people have the money or want to spend the money.
I just have a quick comment.
Yeah.
I just have a quick comment, and it's still what I mentioned before. I've when I was in high school, I scooped gelati. I worked in the food court at a mall, so I've done those types of jobs. They're not that fun, right? So I actually think a better version of the world, rather than regulating, these jobs that are very replaceable, and say take this job that's already not fulfilling, right? And then work half your shifts and just know that you can be replaced at any time by a robot, right? So take a job that's already bad, pay it less, and make it worse. I think what we should do is retrain people so that they can build those machines that are going to automate, right? And that has the potential to be a higher value, higher margin type of work, and therefore they could potentially get paid better. And so McDonald's will be replaced by machines. I think coding and other things can be eventually, a low-skill job if you can retrain and package it in the right way and move people into building the robots.
Well, just a quick rebuttal to that is that Yeah, some jobs are undesirable, but some people don't have a choice.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But I think rather than trying to save something that's going to die, we should help give those people that choice, right? Like I'm from Canada, which is a little bit of a different situation where you don't need to like mortgage your left kidney to go to college, right? And so making education accessible and affordable, right? Giving people who don't have another choice like some education, and then opening up these other jobs of the future, I think that's the right way to focus.
But is that going to be a governmental policy thing that's going to be, I mean, like how who's going to have the mandate to affect that kind of change that's going to, I mean, I don't know if this is beyond the scope of the panel, but I mean, everything you guys are talking about is great for the privileged few, especially in this country, that have access to education and have choices. But for the people that are in the backwater of West Virginia that have like, you know, they can barely get through high school, or, you know, they're part of the opioid like epidemic, like who's gonna drive the policy to allow those people to make the shift in consciousness? Because you're already talking to, you know, the whole early adapter thing, you're talking about people that already want to adapt, people that don't have the imagination or the exposure to allow them to envision a world in which they're not doing those. Like how are we going to affect that change to usher in the future that you guys are talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people talk about universal basic income. That's a Silicon Valley idea. I just don't know enough about economics to speak to that. But one thing I can maybe add to the conversation is there is a huge richness in the internet. There's a huge richness in gaming and technology, the kind of entertainment you can get. You know, it's like if people aren't working, the one thing technology does provide is huge diversion, ability to express yourself. You know, if you look at art, like look at Warhol, 15 minutes of fame. I mean, who could have been more right and more prescient 60 years ago that everyone will be an artist? Everyone kind of is an artist. I mean, that's my only beacon of hope in all of this is like, you can be expressive, you can build community, you can have these really rich lives, you can go explore fantasy worlds, you can connect with people all over, you can find your interests. I don't know about the making money thing, maybe someone has some bright idea about that. But there is something happening with technology where you do have a certain richness of life and connectivity to the planet wherever you are. And I don't know that, I don't think it really makes up. You got something to say here?
Kind of. I think it's interesting in relation to like ed tech. Like I grew up in a place with like, actually Canada as well, but I'm from Oshawa.
Nice.
And you can see it on his face. He's like, yeah, Oshawa's like a horrible town. It's like, it's a car town. We make like cars and criminals, and that's about it.
I'm from Winnipeg.
Oh no, that's crazy. So you're kind of a car criminal too. And like a flat car criminal. So the thing is that you know, when you grow up someplace like that, you don't really have access to these kind of ideas and this kind of conversation if you like your parents aren't educated or like your friends aren't, or you don't have that around you. But with machine learning, it can actually be really good at training people to do so. I was talking to someone here tonight about an ed tech startup they were working on right there, and kind of like the way that you are trained when you can afford to be trained properly is like a lot of repetitive behavior in relation to processes that are good at teaching a human to learn. But you can teach it, a machine can teach you that all the same, and actually maybe do it in a more interesting way, and maybe weave narrative into it as well, and make it affordable. So I'm hoping that there's that happening as well, where it's basically there's a value proposition for an AI company to have humans train the thing that they're trying to build. So maybe there's a way to do that in a way that educates the human, so that you can basically have like a supercharged workforce that is educated in the same pattern, and they did train the AI, but then they can like add their own human inspiration on top of it to like build up the pyramid a bit.
I'd like to actually go back to your question as it relates to this. I know I said earlier I'm bearish about like strong, hard, like Lieutenant Data AI walking, talking, C-3PO shit, but I'm very bullish on the idea that a lot of human tasks are going to be completely automatable to the extent that in the next 100 years it might be scarce to find jobs left that humans are uniquely positioned to do. So to your question of what do you do for the fact that that's going to overwhelmingly favor people who by skin color, where they were born, when they were born, sex, gender, things wholly outside of their control, it's going to disproportionately fuck up a lot of people. That sucks. And I don't know the answer, and no one on this panel knows the answer, and that probably, finding that answer, is critically important to every person in this room. And this, I think, is one of the strongest arguments for breaking the really sterile, white, heteronormative, bearded, male, Californian technocrat SF culture, is that if we don't get more inclusive with how we start building these pieces of technology and taking into account perspectives like that, we are all so screwed. That's just it. This is the end of the day thing. If we don't take in those other perspectives, no one here is going to get hurt that bad. But a lot of people are going to get wicked hurt. The best route forward then is going to be bring everybody into this decision-making process such that they are a legitimate stakeholder in the creation of that good future too, as opposed to, I guess we'll just download the next app update from that dude in the bay. So that's my best answer to you is we don't know these 5 white dudes, but somehow we're going to figure it out all together, and that's the best impetus I can.
Let me be a little contentious here.
Please.
Okay, so we're looking at a future where like 99% of people have no jobs.
Yeah.
1% of people have jobs and stuff, right?
Well,
And
probably not jobs, but ownership.
Or something. There's an ownership economy, right, where there's accelerating wealth in the ownership class, and the 1%, everyone knows what the 1% means, right? Right?
And that's not labor, that's capital, that's different. Yeah.
1% of... What's that?
Yeah, right.
Yesterday.
3 p.m.
Like the 1%, right? Everyone knows about the...
You got it.
Yeah. So, how does... I mean, I think it sucks that 1% is like certain people are born into it, you know, either genetically or for class reasons. I mean, class is a big part of that as well. And I mean, I'd love if the 1% were more diverse, but diversity alone isn't going to fix the 1% problem.
Not alone.
I don't see how it would.
No.
You know?
Yeah, we got a question over here. You've been holding your hand for a while.
Yeah, so speaking of that argument, I mean, I honestly believe like technology in the next whatever how many years it advances, like it would actually, my opinion, I believe that it will actually bridge the gap between your rich and your poor and the people that don't have jobs and people that do have jobs. And the reason that's because you guys were speaking about new opportunities, new ways of communications, new different things. And I mean, human beings for many hundreds of decades, we've always coped with situations. And that's just my personal opinion. And my question to you guys: do you think AI will be that big reason to why that gap between society will actually be bridged? Because now people will be thinking differently.
Yeah, just really, I completely agree. Again, I have the optimistic point of view here. Like, if you think about, so in terms of, you know, people who hold capital, right? So part of that in a capitalist society is the ability to own and start a business, right? How much does it cost today to start a business? Very, very little, especially compared to like our grandparents' generation, right? Where you needed office space, you needed advertising, you needed distribution. Like, let's just think of a CPG
if that's
company.
the case, why has the rate of new business creation declined since 1980? You know, like
I haven't seen that stat, but
yeah, you read the articles in the New York Times this week.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could cut the data a different way in terms of like the types of people being able to start companies. That tells a different
Just
story.
absolute
I
numbers.
haven't seen that exact data.
Yeah.
And what it includes, but like it literally could cost a couple $100 to set up a Shopify store and sell T-shirts through Facebook ads, right? And many of these are happening, and people are earning real livings off of this. Or Etsy, right, where people are in a garage creating like, you know, creative furniture and making a living through that. And so I do believe that, and you know, Uber is another good example where, you know, especially with the car sharing programs that they have, you don't even need to own a car, and you can go and drive in a city and earn money. And so I do believe that technology can democratize access to opportunity and access to capital.
Is driving Uber opportunity?
Yeah,
I mean, it's low wage work with like.
I think
it can be really.
Depends on who you are.
Yeah, I think compared to a minimum wage job at McDonald's, it's much better.
Taken. I just don't see that as a solution.
Human perspective versus a computer perspective.
Yeah, I think starting a business is definitely an opportunity. I think, you know, for a freelance, I see this all the time for freelancers, you know, having access to the on-demand economy to earn a good wage actually is an opportunity for a lot of people. And to the point about society and people getting left behind, and to your point, Ramsay, I actually do think it's more, these societal problems exist and have existed for the last 20, 30, 50 years or forever, right?
Over
Yeah.
400 years.
Yeah.
I mean, this country was formed on a class-based system that has not departed.
Exactly.
People have forgotten this. They think it's happening just in the 21st century. They were dealing with this shit in 15th century.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay?
And
so
hopefully
you're
we.
dealing with an over 400-year-old problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of those structural society problems are difficult to solve. The optimistic point of view that I have is what we're talking about here is innovation and wealth creation. And that creates more opportunities for people. It creates tax dollars that can be reinvested. But then there's a separate question of how do we then reinvest those and how do we structure our society? And there's obviously clear problems with that exist today. But with more innovation and more wealth creation, it gives us opportunities to make the right decisions. If we continue to make the wrong decisions, that continues to compound, right, and continues to get worse. But what we're talking about here is on the opportunity side, and then we can just choose what to do with it.
I mean, like a robot, like will probably. I mean, my opinion is just like, cause like a robot, like something that's automated will never actually want to make money. You know what I mean? Like they will be there to help you. I mean, and then you take like who knew back in the 1500s, someone with a dog Instagram account could be making a financial revenue out of that. You know what I mean? It's just like.
Yeah, but how about like, you know, like the poor mom in Mississippi that, like, you know, got as far as like 6th grade and has like 4 kids that she's got to put through school on minimum wage that can't even afford an iPhone.
And that's
doesn't
because
have
technology isn't yet
I know,
advanced.
but this is the thing. You would have to convince, you know, somebody that is investing money to put money into a state like Mississippi to develop that out, or you have to have a state mandated, hey, we're going to put this much money into developing this here. So that is the political and personal question of this age for everybody in this room that has access to the privilege that we have, you know?
And that's an opportunity. And like you said, well, to your point, actually, it takes a lot less energy, time, and manpower to make $1 billion today than it did 20, 30 years ago. You can have a company with only 16 people making $1 billion. So there are opportunities out there. You have to be talented enough to spot them and then execute on them. So maybe this is one opportunity.
They're also wonderful lotteries.
I'm actually going to answer your question about AI and wealth distribution. And I'm going to come down on the side that we should expect AI to exacerbate and make worse wealth inequality. I'm going to answer it with a technical reason here as opposed to a philosophy reason. So a lot of AI, per what you were saying earlier, Stephen, is that this AI is getting good learning systems because it's able to take in new patterns, store those patterns, learn from those patterns, and create pattern detection mechanisms. A lot of these deep learning types of systems are getting very good at this. If you're building an AI-based company today, that your value is going to be created by an AI platform. If your AI is it creates value dependent on open, publicly available data sets, it is very hard for you to build a strategic business moat around your company because your AI can only become valuable off data that was freely available. And since most of the AI tech is commoditized pretty well, anyone can go start up using TensorFlow or any of the Python packages, it's very hard to make an edge there and defend $1 billion or $10 billion company. So this favors finding places where you can build a proprietary data set, a proprietary AI stack, and what you get is a flywheel effect where you have this unique ability to solve someone's problem that gets you more data, it improves your model, you solve their problem better, that gets you more data, it improves your model, so on and so forth. This leads implicitly to a high return on capital around places that strongly have intrinsic proprietary data.